welcome to this week's episode of the Inclusive Networker Podcast. This is your host, Dr. Raymona, and who am I calling into conversation today? Well, it's Sandra Scaiano. I am so excited to have Sandra here, and I am going to tell you just a little bit about her before we get started. So, with over 20 years in PR and marketing for the world's most recognizable brands, Sandra helps entrepreneurs and small business owners build their business through web design, course and membership development, content creation, and a mix of digital strategies. She is the host of the fabulous Long Game podcast with Sandra Scaiano, now in its third year, where she talks business building, digital strategy, and mindset, all in her unique, relatable style. And she is the creator of the Peak, P-E-A-K, framework for course building success, a 4-step foundational framework for course and membership site development. So I am so excited to have you, Sandra, today as my guest. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much. I am really excited to be here and dive in.
Yes. Well, I always start with this same question with my guest. And so I want to ask you, tell me a little bit about your lens. What is your background? Why do you see the world the way that you do?
Well, I always have to lead with Jersey. I'm a Jersey girl. White woman, Jersey girl is really the perspective, but that put me in such a melting pot of a time growing up. We were the proximity to New York City as well. All of my years growing up, going into New York, and in my formative years of high school, really spending a lot of time in different communities in the city, really shaped who I am and the way I think and how outgoing I think I am as well.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, thank you for kind of telling us that and where you're from. And I absolutely love New York, Jersey, all of that area. I have always been living in the deep South, but have traveled there several times and have just loved it's a true change in culture from South Georgia to
Yes.
New York, right? New Jersey. But wonderful, wonderful cities. And so I'm excited to just jump right in. We talk about in diversity, equity, and inclusion in business practices, and you have this wonderful framework called Peak. And I'm so excited to dive into that. So let's just go right there. And so the first letter in your framework, the P is for product. So tell us a little bit about how you move people through that framework. And if you want to go back and tell us about, how or why you developed it, you can do that too. But then tell us a little bit about the P, the product.
Sure. So, this framework did develop out of me working with my private clients. So, this was a hands-on, the process that I developed working behind the scenes and getting them to a successful point. So, I know it works is really the bottom line there.
Okay.
But you need to follow a process, and it helps to have a framework. When you have frameworks, you're able to think about things in different lights and think about your systems and build systems in each pillar of the framework. So, P is for product. And no matter what business we're in, it starts with your product, whether that is a physical product, whether your product is a digital product or a service that you provide. So I really work with clients on sizing up that product so that you're thinking about all of the different communities who could be purchasing your product or working with you for that service. So we think a lot about accessibility in terms of if it's a physical or a digital piece, like even things like contrast of colors, right? Readability, accessibility. When it's a digital piece, I work a lot with course creators. So I'll just use that as an example for this.
Perfect.
You've got your product. People are trained now. I'm going to come watch a video, learn. Well, not everyone learns the same way. So we think about how can we take that video, that course piece, and translate it in different ways. So create an audio version and have that accessible. And this is not just for people, for different learners, but I have clients who have their students and clients are commuters. So they want to be able to listen to something rather than watch it while they're driving to work in
That's
the
good.
car,
Mm-hmm.
right? So like, how do we
Mm-hmm.
make it more accessible? Things like captions on the videos, having transcripts and available for download, and even summaries. I use the platform Kajabi. I'm a big fan of it, and one of the and this is goes across many different platforms, but one of the pieces there is that the layout is there's a video at the top and then a space at the bottom for text. And I find a lot of people don't use that space, but even just having a summary of what's in the video and links to other resources or resources talked about in the video, it all comes into creating this encompassing product that provides the value and the lessons and that instruction, that content piece that you're really trying to get across in different ways, and making it accessible to people so that they're able to find what they need, dive into each part that you're creating as well.
Oh, I love that. And so it's so interesting that you even talked about commuting, because there's so much diversity, right? When we think about different diversity categories and you think about different lifestyles, different family structures,
Mhm.
some people aren't just at home and they're able to look at things on a laptop all the time. They are running, they are needing to listen to it on their phone or watch it on their phone, or do other things besides, the traditional sit at your desk and watch something. And so it's so very important to have all of these different forms of ways that people can ingest the information. So I love
Definitely.
that piece. Yeah.
You need to think about who is your community and who can also be welcomed into your community. So, you
Mhm.
might say, "Hey, oh, I don't have commuters," but it you still can have an audio piece for someone else, or maybe by advertising that you have that, you're inviting different um, people into your world now because you're making it more accessible.
Mhm. Awesome. And so when you say inviting people in, that sends me to entry, the E. So let's talk about the entry and what that means in your framework, and how you incorporate inclusion into that.
Sure. So entry is really the onboarding piece. And how do we
Mm.
bring people into our world once they've purchased a product? How do we get them? The goal is always to have them engage with your content, whether that's a digital content or even a physical product, things like that. We want them to engage. And so, you know, in business, things are very customer centric, which I get, and they should be. But I also like to try and think about the business owner's experience. So I just want to kind of wrap the peak framework within that, because a lot of what we
Mhm.
do is about the joy and our experience as business owners. So E is for entry. And the more you set up your entry with what your customer is going to need to access, they're able to go and help themselves. And part of this is not having customer service inquiries for you. I mean, think about it. If you have set things up, this is where to find this, here's a link to that, this is the next step, and people clearly know, they're able to engage and not say, "Hey, where do I go? Whatever, what do I do next?" As solopreneurs or preneurs with small teams, we
Mhm.
we can't field all those questions in addition to teaching and marketing and all of that, right? I have clients who
Yes.
have 500 plus people at a time in their programs, and if 500 people send in a customer service, I don't know how to do this, like, I need all of them to just go in and engage and help themselves along the way. So
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
really what E is about, is that entry piece. And it's thinking about where people are coming from, what are their experiences, what do they need to know, and how to provide that. I kind of say it's like being a good host in a lot of ways. You have a party and someone asks to use the restroom, you don't just say, "Yeah, go figure it out." You say, "Oh, it's down the hall to the left." It's just about showing um, that hosting skill of letting people know and taking care of them along the way. And that's another
Mhm.
piece of this. The more that you take care of your audience, they're going to feel that. So you want to think about that. Where people are coming from and what their experiences are, so you can provide what they need to know as well.
Yeah, I love that perspective of how are you thinking about not only the client, but how you want to live your life and business. And this is super important for network marketers because a lot of times you have teams of 1,000 people. And if all of those people are asking you questions,
Oh, yeah.
you are absolutely not having the time freedom that you have been promised. Right. And so it's so important to be that great host, and sometimes the being a great host means you have great signage,
Right.
right? So like what you're saying is that you don't have to tell every person that comes into your house where the bathroom is. If you have a great sign there that says this way to
Right.
the bathroom, then they can go themselves, and then you're still being a great host because they know what to do, they know where to go. And that's, I think, what you're saying with your entry piece is that it's you just got to tell people what to do without you having to tell people what to do, right?
Exactly. It's, and it's done, it's curated is really
Yeah,
it. It's done with thought and care, but we can't have a personal touch in terms of you taking everybody to the bathroom and showing them, right?
exactly.
But it's done thoughtfully, and that's really what we try and do with our customer journey is be thoughtful about it. Every one of us who has a product or a business has a customer journey. And so you want to think about those steps along the way. What does your customer need to know at each stage along the way as well?
And as you're thinking about the customer journey, how have you incorporated diversity and inclusion in that thought process? So, how do people really think about different races, ethnicities, different family structures, lifestyles? How do we think about that as we're moving through the thought process of the customer journey?
Well, I think, first of all, you have to look at what your existing um, system is, right? And start to say,
Hmm.
what lens are you bringing to it? What's your lens? I'm bringing this lens to it. So I'm bringing a white woman lens from the Northeast. So I'm looking at it in a particular way. So how can we start to think about, I'm outreaching to different geographic areas. How can I start thinking about what their needs are? It could be as simple as time zones and calls,
Hmm.
right? And thinking, oh, I have people who are on the West Coast now, and I need to be thoughtful about that. I have people who are, from Europe now, and it's in the opposite direction of the time zone. So you start to think about what communities you're marketing to as well and what their needs are. And then you can
Hmm.
start incorporating that into your systems, because it's really, you're ultimately in control of your systems. And I do want to just say
Yep.
too that systems are never finite, right? They're malleable and we're always learning. And as the best way to adjust your system is to pay attention to the questions that you're asked. So if people are asking
Mm,
questions about your product or your process or your program, you haven't made yourself clear, which is okay. Like, we're not beating ourselves up over this. We're saying,
yeah.
all right, I've got to go and add that to my marketing and make it clearer that this is my process or this is my system or this is who I
Hmm.
serve, even, right? Like, hey, a lot of times people say, is this for me? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, if people are asking if this is for you, then that's an opportunity to start to say, who is that person asking the question and how can I be more inclusive in my copy, in what I'm putting out there, all of that, and in my systems.
Hmm. And I love the action that you said there, and that's just starting where you are. And so if you know the different diversity categories within the small group that you have, at least just start there. And so it doesn't seem so overwhelming. And so if I have a commuter, a single mom, and a woman, then I need to know that I am going, or a man, then I'm going to say, okay, well, what do I need to concentrate on these diversity categories? Then I can keep expanding and keep thinking more about what I need to do to grow in this area. And it's not only just thinking about it, but what actions do I take to adjust my systems? And so start small, think about the diversity categories that you already have, make sure that you're attentive to them, because you can't say, I'm going to bring in all of these diverse people, and then you're not even attentive to the diversity that you have on
Yeah.
your team or in your course
100%.
already, right? So
And
I
you
love
don't
that
have to,
piece.
it doesn't have to be overwhelming. I'm going to bring in
Yeah.
all these diverse categories. It's
Yeah.
just like you said, starting small and adding to it, and then seeing who those communities are and who is giving you feedback as well, asking you
Mhm.
questions, all of that. You start to adjust and say, oh, okay, I can make, um, I can make tweaks to my process and my marketing and my systems so that people aren't asking those questions next time and they're seeing it and feeling it to be able to come in.
Mhm. Yes. And so we talked a little bit about not having to tell everybody where the bathroom is and have something that automatically tells them. So that moves into your A, which is the automation. And so let's talk about that. What happens with the A and the automations?
So automation is about if you've got to do something more than once, more than twice, I'd say. You want to automate that. Again, we are singular people running businesses for the most part.
Mhm.
And so you want to think about tools as a way to help you. Tools can be a digital assistant to you. Most tools are really affordable in the scheme of things compared to hiring a person, and they can really leverage your time so much more. So I
Mhm.
automate a lot in my business, and a lot in my clients' communication in what they're doing. And with this, you really need to understand your customer journey. You need to know the different steps that they're taking along the way and the steps that you want them to take along the way. One of the questions I always have my clients answer is, what's next? Like,
Mhm.
okay, they've gone through this process. What's next? Because when you give people a good experience, they want to know what's next. And again, there's no wrong answer here. You can have, it can be, I'm going to put you on my email list. It can be, oh, I'm going to put you into another product because now you've graduated, type of thing. There is no wrong answer, but that again is part of the customer journey. And all of this, when you know that process, you can automate all of this. So you can
Mhm.
have emails that send out at certain junctures in the relationship, at certain places in the course. I know that the third module is going to be really tough. And so some of the ways that you can also really be inclusive with this process is, let's say you send an email. I know this third module is going to be tough. Here's how you can get support. You don't stay stuck. You reach out,
Mhm.
and I'm going to let you know how to do that. So, those are some of the things that we do with automation. And it really helps free up your time because again, we are creating systems in our business. So once
Mhm.
something is in a system, you don't need to keep doing it again and again. This also gets tweaked along the way. Nothing is finite. Oh, this happened, we should send another email then. Okay, that makes sense now.
Mhm.
So automations are your friend, and a lot of people get scared by them because they involve tech. I'm
Yeah.
doing air quotes, everyone. The scary tech piece, but you can just take it again one step at a time, one process at a time. What can I find that is going to help me figure this out and create a process?
Yes. And then so you just kind of went to this piece, which is the K, and that's keep in touch.
Right.
And so as you're keeping in touch with the people, I always say don't just drop people off after they've given you their money. How do we keep in touch? What are the processes that you put in place to keep in touch?
And listen, all business is about relationships. And that's
Mhm.
really, if you're viewing it that way, you're in the right mindset, right? So we want to keep in touch, and keep in touch can mean many things. Keep in touch can be during the process, right? I want you to know while you're in the midst of this process that I'm here for you and I'm taking care of you and I'm guiding you through the steps. And this keep in touch some of that can be automated, right? Like I can set up an email sequence that you get for so long along the way. Keep in touch can be at the end where you've gone through a process or a course, or you've used a product, and now I'm going to put you on my email list so that you are hearing from me along the way. Keep in touch can be, you can direct them to, hey, I do a lot on YouTube, or I post every week or every day on TikTok. Make sure you follow me there, right? Directing people to how you can continue to communicate them and build and further that relationship. So keep in touch is one that it goes the whole length, even though it comes at the end of the framework. It's kind of woven in along everything along the way.
I love that. Yes. And I often talk about that when we talk about dissemination of information, and that dissemination happens from the beginning of a process, not just at the end. Because if it just happens at the end, then people are waiting to know the results, or to have follow up, or to have any kind of information. And so when we learn to start to keep in touch from the beginning, then it's a normal process, and people are more likely to be retained in our systems, right? And so I love that.
And I mentioned email a lot, but email is not the only way to keep in touch.
Right.
And that's another way to bring inclusion, diversity, DEI into what you're doing, is think about the different means and processes that you can use to keep in touch. That could be a Facebook group. That could be text messaging. That could be, having people, again, subscribe to a social media platform like TikTok, where they're following you along the way. So there's all of these different ways to communicate, and you can offer multiple ways as well. It doesn't have to be one singular approach.
Awesome. Well, I have absolutely loved this framework, Sandra. Product, entry, automations, and keep in touch. Anything else that you want to leave with the inclusive networker community as you are ending today?
Yes, I would love to invite your audience to come and listen to my podcast, The Long Game. There are a lot of business practices, strategies, mindset work that we do there. And we are very sensitive to these conversations and these concepts in terms of relationship building and inclusion and diversity there. So you can come and find me at thelonggamepodcast.net to listen in there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sandra. And thank you all so much for listening to this episode of the Inclusive Networker Podcast. Thank you again to my fabulous guest, Sandra Scaiano. You will find her information in the show notes, and we will see you on the next episode of the Inclusive Networker. Bye.